Hello everyone, my name is Dario Tiqui and this is my IPP presentation for Employee Crime Control. So let's talk about what employee crime actually is. So employee crime is when employees have been stealing from the company through embezzlement, fraud, or other activities. Employee crime is a common problem that is widespread, but not only is employee crime widespread, it is also growing. So employee crime is growing in size, in complexity, and in stealthiness. Stealthiness as in businesses tend to use the internet more often nowadays and have become more and more reliant on the internet and web-designed financial programs. In this presentation, we will be talking about a couple of things. First of all, we'll be talking about how big and how serious the problem of employee crime actually is. And then we'll talk about the certain statistics on why. Then we'll be talking about the types of employee crime and fraud. So we'll be talking about the certain types of crime and fraud that these employees would be committing. Then we'll be talking about the difficulty of confrontation and how it may be difficult to bring up the idea of employee crime into the workplace. And then we will be talking about the employee crime causes, so there's certain types of causes that would make people commit these crimes. And then lastly, we'll be talking about how to prevent employee crime and the certain methods to do so. Alright, let's get a better idea of how big the employee crime problem actually is. So typically, an organization will lose 5% of revenue each year to fraud. The median of revenue loss caused by fraud is around $145,000. 22% of the cases had losses of $1 million or more. Alright, so fraud isn't usually found immediately. It takes around 18 months for it to discover that it is occurring. In approximately 30% of the cases, multiple forms of fraud is being committed. So generally, small companies will suffer a larger loss. And then the higher the perpetrator's authority, then the greater the fraud loss is. Now let's talk about the types of employee crime and fraud. So the types of organizations play a big part in which the company is most susceptible to employee crime. So for instance, a manufacturing company is susceptible to theft of materials and finished goods. So usually a manufacturing company would get stuff stolen like products, finished goods, and things like that. On another note, a service company like an architectural or an engineering firm is more susceptible to embezzlement and fraud. And lastly, geotechs are susceptible to theft of their surveying equipment. So the types of so let's move on to the difficulty of confrontation. So for instance, no business wants to deal with a confrontation to employee crime. The reason for that is because in order to confront employees about employee crime, it can give the wrong impression. With the wrong impression, it can also lower morale because the employees wouldn't feel like they were trusted. So addressing employee crime in the workforce is never easy. But bringing the topic into discussion is the first step to reduce the chance of employee crime to occur in the workplace. Alright, so now we move further into the certain types of employee crime. So first of all, manipulation of company financial statements would be an example of fraud or embezzlement. Another example of that would be falsified billings from perpetrator's shell company or check forging or tampering. There are things like purchasing or sales schemes that would funnel funds to the perpetrator's bank account. Now, it wouldn't only have to be the perpetrator's bank account, it could be another offshore account, but it would just be a purchasing or sales scheme that would funnel funds elsewhere. There are also manipulated time records, which means that employees would mess with their time records and would actually get paid for more than what they actually worked for. There are things like ghost employees or falsified wages or withholdings. A ghost employee would be something like an employee that would not be real, and you could just funnel money through there. There are also expense reimbursement schemes. There are bribery or illegal gratuities. There's also invoice kickbacks, and there's also bid rigging. And bid rigging is actually a fraudulent scheme in which there'd be a non-competitive bid that would be performed by corrupt employees or officials by firms, and they would orchestrate like an act of collusion or between officials and firms, which is illegal in most countries. Then there would be the theft of cash on hand, so that's just pretty simple. It'd be stealing cash from your company. There are also types that are not included in here. There would be certain things such as stealing products or finished goods or stuff like that, as we discussed earlier. But these are just a few of the certain types of employee crime. There's many more types of employee crime that can be committed. Now let's talk about the causes of employee crime. One of the main causes would be hiring the wrong people. It is shown that people who avoid stealing because they don't want to get caught are more likely to commit crimes than people who are avoiding crime according to their integrity. So what that means is like people who have the thought of stealing but avoid stealing because they don't want to get caught are more likely to commit the crimes. Also, hiring is based off of skills and experience. The hard thing is that personality or values cannot be taught. So in hiring the wrong people, you'd have to make sure that through like personality tests or things like that, so that you're hiring the right people instead of the wrong people. Another main cause would be opportunity. If there's opportunity, there's temptation to commit employee crime. So some things to prevent employee crime would be processes, procedures, and checks and balances. Those can eliminate the opportunity for theft to actually take place. And too much control without accountability can lead to opportunity. So if someone is given too much control over things like checks and balances, then it can lead to an opportunity to commit employee crime. Here are some other causes of employee crime. So blind trust would be trusting employees that would seem too good to be true and would be very unexpected to commit on employee crime. There's also incentive or pressure. With the right incentive and pressure, anyone really is capable of committing employee crime. There's also a more subtle crime, which would be time wasting. It would be using company time and not completing tasks by doing other things like surfing the web or texting or having a long break. There's also rationalization or retaliation. So this usually occurs when an employee thinks they have a reason to retaliate or get even. It usually happens when there are pay cuts or unfair treatment to employees. Finally, we move on to methods to prevent employee crime. One method would be situational strategy, which would mean to implement surveillance techniques using employees' alarms or videos by improving security lighting on security cameras or require employee identification. There's also development strategies that would be examining root causes of crimes against companies. There's also hiring strategies, which would implement hiring practices like background checks and drug testing. Another method would be detection techniques, which would be to frequently check bank statements and have unscheduled audits. But no matter what measures are taken, businesses will likely still become crime victims. But the number of size and occurrences will be smaller. In conclusion, employee crime is a very big and growing and also serious widespread problem. There are certain types of employee crime and there are certain types of employee crime causes. It is important that employee crime is discussed in the workplace and there are measures that can be taken to prevent employee crime from occurring. With that being said, here are my works cited and here are my peer review sources, and that concludes my project. Thank you for listening.